convinced they had been insulted by the finest mind in Europe. At the age of 65, after more than 35 years of waiting, the Nile had reached Cairo, as Schopenhauer put it. He loved the fame that he genuinely deserved, but died within 7 years, on September 21st, 1860. Schopenhauer's combative, pessimistic writings were to prove a deep influence on such disparate figures as Wagner, Freud, Tolstoy, Nietzsche, and Jacob Burckhardt, to name but a few. Most of these men read only his essays, but they certainly gleaned the chilling message of his metaphysics. Yet how could Schopenhauer really claim to know that behind the world of appearances lay a cold, dark, unrelenting and unthinking will? According to Schopenhauer, we are all given the opportunity to see behind the world of appearances by looking inside ourselves. Afterword. Schopenhauer didn't attract followers, he attracted disciples. Such was the impact of his utterly novel approach to philosophy on the staid intellectual world of mid-19th century Germany. Yet not all these disciples were easily led sycophants. Among them were some of the finest minds of the next generation. Long before the belated arrival of Schopenhauer's fame, his work had been discovered by the young Richard Wagner. Its disruptive effect overwhelmed him, and in the 1848 Revolution, Wagner, in the company of the anarchist Mikhail Bakunin, was inspired to take to the barricades in Leipzig. As we have seen, Schopenhauer was horrified by such behavior, which could easily have cut off his private income, and thus forced the philosopher to embark upon the asceticism he so recommended. Wagner had been intoxicated with Schopenhauer's writing and filled with Schopenhauerian pessimism. In his youthful enthusiasm, Wagner blended this seemingly incompatible combination into an anarchic nihilism that was all his own. For years afterward he continued to gain artistic inspiration from reading Schopenhauer, despite the fact that his understanding of the philosopher's work bore little semblance to what Schopenhauer had intended. Siegfried is not noted for his oriental resignation. Schopenhauer's appeal to the creative temperament has continued to the present day, inspiring almost as many different responses as it has creators. Figures as disparate as Thomas Mann, James Joyce, Samuel Beckett, and Thomas Bernhardt all found a rapport in Schopenhauer and his pessimistic outlook. But Schopenhauer's effect on ensuing philosophers was to be even more drastic and even more disparate. The hapless Philipp Meinlander took Schopenhauer's pessimistic view of the world to its extreme with regard to the problems of both society and the individual. The only way to solve the problem of the poor was to give them everything they desired. This would immediately convince them of the vanity of such things and the futility of life. They would then be able to face up to the problem of individual existence, which Meinlander solved by committing suicide. Nietzsche decided to take a different approach. By far the most brilliant and profound thinker to be affected by Schopenhauer, Nietzsche simply turned Schopenhauer's idea of the will on its head. Instead of the world being driven by a blind evil will, which could be combated only by ascetic withdrawal, Nietzsche advocated the will to power. Here lay the driving force within all human nature, and the great men of history had been its finest manifestation. Adopting a cunning blend of both Schopenhauer's and Nietzsche's notions of the will, Freud was later to propose the notion of the subconscious mind. More recently, Schopenhauer had a profound effect on the very last of the traditional philosophers. Freud's fellow Viennese, Ludwig Wittgenstein, was profoundly influenced by both Schopenhauer's pessimism and his inherently mystical view of the world. Wittgenstein's famous dictum, "About that which we cannot speak, we must remain silent," Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus 7, may be speaking ostensibly of language and meaning, but it bears an uncanny resemblance to Schopenhauer's advocacy of withdrawal from the dark, unseen will that remains forever beyond our understanding. From Schopenhauer's writings. When we perceive and consider the existence, life, and activity of any natural creature, e.g. an animal, it appears to us to be essentially an inscrutable mystery, despite all we can learn about it from zoology and comparative anatomy. But why does nature forever refuse to answer such questions? Surely, like everything great, She is open, communicative, and even naive. So why does nature forever refuse to answer such questioning? The reason we have no answer can only be because our question was incorrectly formulated, arose from our own narrow-minded assumptions, or was self-contradictory. Is it possible that there is a chain of grounds and consequence which must remain forever unfathomable to us? Certainly not. Just the opposite. Such matters are unfathomable because we search for grounds and consequence in a sphere which is foreign to such things. Parerga and Paralaipomena, section 65. Thing in itself signifies that which exists independently of our perception by means of the senses. In other words, it is that which really and truly is. Democritus called this matter. In the end, so did Locke. For Kant, it was an X, and for me it is will. Parerga and Paralaipomena, section 61. Only at one point do I have access to the world other than as representation. This is in myself. When I perceive my body, this is representation. But I am also aware of those urges which give rise to this representation. This is the will. Only within myself do I have this dual knowledge of will and representation. The world as will and representation. The dual knowledge we each have of the nature and activity of our own body, which is given to us in two completely different ways, is now clear. We will therefore make further use of this as a key to the essential character of every phenomenon in nature. All objects which are not our own body, and thus not given to our knowledge in a double way, but only as representation, we shall judge to be similar to our own body. And as we know they are similar to our body in the first way, we shall assume that they are similar in the second way. Thus, when we take away their existence as representation, all that remains is what we call will, just the same as in our own bodies. What other kind of existence or reality should we attribute to the rest of the material world? How else can we conceive of such a world? For besides will and representation, nothing else is known to us, or even conceivable. The World as Will and Representation, second book. We complain that we live in ignorance, unable to understand the connection between all existence, and in particular the connection between our particular existence and the whole of existence. Our life is not only short, but our knowledge of it severely limited. We can't look back beyond our birth, or forward beyond our death. Our consciousness is a momentary flicker in the midst of night. It appears as if some malevolent demon has limited our ability to know, so that he can enjoy our discomfort. But such a complaint is unjustified. It is based on the mistaken idea that the world was created by an intellect, and as a result originated as a mental picture or representation before it became real. According to this mistaken view, the world originated from knowledge and was thus accessible to knowledge, capable of being analyzed and completely understood by it. But the truth is, what we complain of not knowing is not known by any one or anything, and is in itself absolutely unknowable. It is in fact inconceivable. Parerga and Paralaipomena, section 67. The state to which death restores us is our original state, that is to say, the one peculiar to our true nature, whose essential force manifests itself by producing and maintaining the life that we lose in death. This is the state of the thing in itself as distinct from the phenomenon. In this original state, cerebral knowledge, which deals only with phenomena, is thus superfluous. So it disappears. Its disappearance is for us identical with the disappearance of the phenomenal world, which was its medium, and whose disappearance leaves it redundant. Even if, while we were in this original state, we were offered this animal consciousness, we would refuse it, just as a cured cripple refuses crutches. Thus, whoever begrudges the impending loss of his cerebral consciousness, which is merely a phenomena and can only be used in the phenomenal realm, is like the converted Greenlanders who refused the idea of heaven because there were no seals in it. Parerga and Paralaipomena, section 139. All this means is that life can be regarded as a dream and death as the awakening from it, in which case the individual personality belongs to the dreaming rather than the waking state. Subsequently, death appears to the individual personality as annihilation. On the other hand, if we look upon life as a dream, death no longer becomes a transition to something strange or new, but merely a return to our original state, where life is seen merely as a brief episode. Parega and Paralaipomena, section 139. Still more preposterous is the theory that the state is the condition of moral freedom, and in this way the condition of morality. Freedom lies beyond phenomena, and indeed beyond human arrangements. As we have seen, the state is hardly directed against egoism in general. On the contrary, it arose through egoism and exists only to further it. This egoism is well aware of where its best interests lie. It proceeds methodically, forsaking the narrowly individual point of view in favor of the universal point of view, thus becoming the common egoism of all. The state is therefore created on the understanding that its citizens will not behave morally, that is, choose to act in the right way for moral reasons, i.e., for the good of all. For if this were the case, there would be no need for the state in the first place. So the state, which is intended to bring about the well-being of its citizens, is by no means directed against egoism in general. It is only directed against the multiplicity of particular egoisms and their deleterious effect on the collective egoism which desires the general well-being. The World as Will and Representation, 4th book. Money is human happiness in theory. Anyone who is no longer capable of actual happiness longs for money. When will replaces knowledge, the result is obstinacy. If you want to know your true feelings towards someone, note the immediate impression made on you by the arrival of an unexpected letter from him, or her. Parega and Paralaipomena, section 320, 321, and 326. Chronology of significant philosophical dates. 6th century BC. The beginning of Western philosophy with Thales of Miletus. End of 6th century BC. Death of Pythagoras. 399 BC. Socrates sentenced to death in Athens. Circa 387 BC. Plato founds the Academy in Athens, the first university. 335 BC. Aristotle founds the Lyceum in Athens, a rival school to the Academy. 324 AD. Emperor Constantine moves capital of Roman Empire to Byzantium. 400 AD. St. Augustine writes his Confessions. Philosophy absorbed into Christian theology. 410 AD. Sack of Rome by Visigoths heralds opening of Dark Ages. 529 AD. Closure of Academy in Athens by Emperor Justinian marks end of Hellenic thought. Mid-13th century. Thomas Aquinas writes his commentaries on Aristotle, era of scholasticism. 1453. Fall of Byzantium to Turks, end of Byzantine Empire. 1492. Columbus reaches America. Renaissance in Florence and revival of interest in Greek learning. 1543. Copernicus publishes On the Revolution of the Celestial Orbs, proving mathematically that the earth revolves around the sun. 1633. Galileo forced by Church to recant heliocentric theory of the universe. 1641. Descartes publishes his Meditations, the start of modern philosophy. 1677. Death of Spinoza allows publication of his Ethics. 1687. Newton publishes Principia, introducing concept of gravity. 1689. Locke publishes Essay Concerning Human Understanding, start of empiricism. 1710. Berkeley publishes Principles of Human Knowledge, advancing empiricism to new extremes. 1716. Death of Leibniz. 1739 to 1740. Hume publishes Treatise of Human Nature, taking empiricism to its logical limits. 1781. Kant, awakened from his dogmatic slumbers by Hume, publishes Critique of Pure Reason. Great era of German metaphysics begins. 1807. Hegel publishes The Phenomenology of Mind, high point of German metaphysics. 1818. Schopenhauer publishes The World as Will and Representation, introducing Indian philosophy into German metaphysics. 1889. Nietzsche, having declared God is dead, succumbs to madness in Turin. 1921. Wittgenstein publishes Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, claiming the final solution to the problems of philosophy. 1920s. A Vienna Circle propounds logical positivism. 1927. Heidegger publishes Being and Time, heralding split between analytical and continental philosophy. 1943. Sartre publishes Being and Nothingness, advancing Heidegger's thought and instigating existentialism. 1953. Posthumous publication of Wittgenstein's Philosophical Investigations, high era of linguistic analysis. Chronology of Schopenhauer's life. 1788. Arthur Schopenhauer born in Danzig. 1793. Schopenhauer family leaves for Hamburg before Prussian occupation of Danzig. 1803 to 1804. Accompanies family on tour of Europe. 1805. Suicide of father. 1807. Moves to Weimar. 1811 to 1813. Studies in Berlin. 1814. Acrimonious end to relationship with mother. 1819. First edition of The World as Will and Representation published. 1820. Lectures in Berlin a dismal failure. 1821. Throws Frau Market downstairs and loses court case incurring regular payments. 1833. Settles in Frankfurt. 1844. Second edition of The World as Will and Representation. 1851. Publishes Parerga and Paralaipomena. 1853. Achieves fame at last. 1860. Dies in Frankfurt. This concludes the reading of Schopenhauer in 90 Minutes by Paul Strathern. Copyright 1999 by Paul Strathern. This book was read by Robert Whitfield. This unabridged recording was published by arrangement with Ivan R.D., publisher, and was produced in 2004 by Blackstone Audiobooks Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Neither this recording nor any portion of it may be reproduced or used for any purpose without prior written authorization from Blackstone Audiobooks. If you would like to obtain a complete catalogue of our titles or our monthly update telling you about new releases and our new collection of books on CD and MP3, write to Blackstone Audiobooks, P.O. Box 969, Ashland, Oregon, zip code 97520, or call 1-800-SAY-BOOK. That's 1-800-729-2665. You may also obtain the same information from our award-winning website. Our address, all one word, is www.blackstoneaudio.com. Thank you.